Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The time is 5:31. If you guys could all join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Thank you. At this time, Director Rogers will recite the land acknowledgement.
Evergreen Public Schools resides on the traditional lands of the Chinookan peoples and the Cowlitz tribe. They have lived on and cared for this land and its waterways since time immemorial. We thank them for their stewardship and make this acknowledgement to open a space of recognition, inclusion, and respect for all Indigenous students, families, and staff in our community.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to do a roll call. Director Victoria Bradford is attending remotely today. Is she with us, Lori?
Here.
Director Rob Perkins.
Here.
Director Julie Bocanegra.
Here.
Director Rachel Rogers.
Here.
Superintendent Mike Merlino.
Here.
Administrative Assistant Lori Stroll. All right. So at this time, I'd like to accept adoption of the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda as
Second.
presented.
It's moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Right. Entertain a motion for the board consent agenda.
Move adoption of the board consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, I guess I pause a little and wait for Victoria back there. Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, moving forward. Move on to the superintendent's consent agenda.
I move adoption of the superintendent's consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so now we are on to the proposal of the 2021-2022 Evergreen School District budget, second reading. I'll turn it over to Superintendent Merlino.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate it. Being more informal. Sorry about that. So I am going to kind of talk briefly about the budget. The budget has been developed throughout the late winter, early spring, and late spring through within the district. And the process that we follow is that we work on that internally. We make it available to the public by the middle of July. We then have individual meetings with the board to kind of outline some of the factors that we've used to drive the budget. And then 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation at the board meeting presenting the budget for 21-22. And so tonight, the action is just, again, to kind of point out some of the highlights of the budget. And then what the board actually does tonight is once we've stopped this presentation, is approve a resolution that authorizes expenditure levels and a variety of things. And I'll talk about the resolution when we get to it. The first slide just kind of gives us an overview of the beginning fund balance for 21-22, which is approximately $28 million. We will run August payroll. We'll close the books over the course of the next couple months, but we'll be right around $28 million when we start the 21-22 school year. We're expecting to receive revenue and expenditures of roughly $413 million in the 21-22 school year, and at the end of the day, ending approximately where we started at around $28 million. The board has a policy. If you look, committed to minimum fund balance policy, the board has a policy of 5% of the previous year's expenditures we have to have set aside in case we need it for any type of an emergency. I think at the big picture level, What we talked about 2 weeks ago and I would talk about again today is we were fortunate that the federal government over the course of this last year passed the Emergency School Reconciliation. It's ESSER is what it's called, but we were fortunate to receive ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 funds, basically to help us deal with the significant enrollment decline that we had in the 2021 school year, to deal with the kind of extraordinary costs that we saw from the pandemic related to technology, related to PPE, protective equipment, and just related to the fact that without kids in the schools, it completely changed the allocation. So I would say a significant point of that is that we continue to be able to use those funds in the 21-22 school year and then into 22-23 and beyond. We built enrollment for this school year based on looking at the 21-22 school year if we hadn't gone through the significant reductions from the year before, from 2021, and then built in a little bit of a decline because we've seen bigger classes at the higher grade levels go through and some smaller kindergarten classes coming in. Our first count date for this school year will be 2 weeks from today, September 7th, I believe it is, the Tuesday after Labor Day. At this point in time, we have to see what happens for the next couple of weeks in terms of enrollment, but the enrollment numbers that we're seeing are fairly similar to kind of what we had seen last year. So where there might have been some expectation that there would be an uptick in enrollment with a lot of kids that went away or kind of stayed home or ended up going to private school or homeschooling or doing something different. We're not seeing that yet. It's not to say that we won't over the next 2 weeks, but again, we have ESSER funds to help cushion us as we've kind of talked, but we will continue to monitor that as we get through the next couple weeks. The next slide is just a slide that we've shared over the course of since about the 05, 06, 06, 07 year. So for the last 14, 15 years, we've looked at how did we spend our money in areas of expenditure back from 04, 05, and then we went through some budget reductions in the 09, 10, 11, 12 school years. And it was important at the time for the district, the board absolutely supported, the community supported that we would try to make sure that we were keeping as much money in the classroom as possible. So what we've kind of done over time is measured ourselves versus where we were in 04, 05. What percentage are we spending in the various areas? What is the average of districts our size? Roughly, there's 10 districts that we kind of compare with size-wise. And then what's the state average? So it looks at 04, 05, the most recent year that was completed, 1920, and then what we have in the 21-22 budget. And so over time, you can see the increase in money that has shifted from central administration to teaching and support. And that's important that we continue to do that. When I look at this slide, I look at in 04, 05, we were at around 69.6%. We budgeted around 73.4. Last 1920, we were at 74%. So that 5% of additional funds roughly being spent in teaching classrooms, it's in the library, it's in counseling support, it's in things like that, represents about a $20 million expenditure on an annual basis that we've kept in the classroom. We have historically been low on the administration side, central administration, and we've been more closer to the average or a little above in building administration, and that's, I think, helped us with the work in the buildings. So this is really something that we've showed every year for the last several years, and it's just an informational item. And that's it. There you go. So the next thing I want to talk about really quickly is the resolution. What does the resolution do? The resolution allows us to, I think it'll show up on the screen in a second. You each have a copy of it up here, but it's coming. All this new technology in this, it's hard to imagine And there we go. That looks good. So that's the second page, I think, of the resolution. Can you go to the top of that? So what we do with the resolution is do things like setting the levies that have been approved by the voters. So you can see partway down at the bottom, it sets the maintenance and operation excess levy in the amount of $38,650,000. That's the number that the community approved in our levy in 2019. In this 22 school year, we will be bringing another levy because the 2022 is the last year of a 3-year levy that was approved in 2019. Over the course of the fall, we'll be talking with the community a lot about the renewal of that levy. The board will have conversations about the amount that they'd be interested in setting that at. If you go a little lower, we have the operations levy in the general fund. We have a capital levy of $9,445,000. That is a technology levy that's helped us fund the technology that had us in a position to be able to go to the 1-to-1. And then also a debt service fund levy of roughly $38 million. The debt service fund levy is when we pass a bond. The bond allows us to move forward with building projects, and you've likely seen throughout the community all of the different building projects that have been ongoing the last few years. The debt service levy allows us then to collect taxes to make payments on the principal and interest, like they'd be like house payments for an individual. So you can see that we're resolving to have the levies approved. We also have the transfer of revenue between funds. The $1,026,000 is a transfer from the capital projects fund into our qualified school construction bonds. That is to make a payment on bonds that we used to build Gila High School several years ago. And then ultimately you get down to the actual expenditure amounts that the board's authorizing. So you're authorizing in those funds, those limits of expenditure. And you can extend that if you come back and do a budget extension. I don't really anticipate that happening in the 21-22 school year. So that's the actual official action being taken tonight would be the approval of the resolution setting our expenditure levels and allowing for some transfers, allowing us to levy money on the taxpayers as previously been approved. That's my, and then the last thing that it mentions on there is that the board is also adopting a 4-year budget summary, the F-195F document that we also talked a little bit about 2 weeks ago as well. So these are the actions that this resolution allows for our budget for the 21-22 school year. And happy to answer any questions.
Is there any questions from the audience regarding the budget? Any comments or questions? You have a question? If you could come on up to the podium and just state your name, please.
I'm fairly new here. For previous construction that has been going on in the district at this point?
Projects fund is for construction projects. That's exactly right. So when
Okay.
the board, when the voters passed the bond in 2018 and authorized us then to sell bonds to do the construction. So you see this building, the buildings on this campus, Mountain View, Y East, the elementary schools, all of that is running through that.
So are there any further school building projects in that budget, or is that taking care of
This
the
is
existing projects that are going on today?
the only schools that are still, like Burton Elementary hasn't, maybe we just recently started breaking ground on that, but that's,
Okay,
and then Mill Plain Elementary School, because of the fact that we've had a really good experience and actually been under budget and kind of ahead of schedule, it allowed us to free up some additional funds. And so Mill Plain is a school that we haven't started yet. We're
yeah,
replacing.
I go by the other day and scratch my head and wonder, that's one of the, is the oldest school in the district and it's still standing. I But what is going on there? They're replacing a lot of these other ones.
It was
That-
remodeled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the reason it wasn't on the original proposal, because it had been remodeled, and so
Oh.
when you've done the remodeling, then it didn't score as high on the needs assessment as some of the other buildings, but it was the next building. And so when we had the excess capacity, it allowed us to go ahead and move forward with replacing Mill Plain. So next time you drive by, you'll scratch your head and say, I didn't think you were doing it. And then pretty soon you'll start to see some of the work.
I appreciate all the stuff that's gone on so far in the district. It's been waiting for years for this to happen. And this project right here is just overwhelming. I know you guys have been in the portables down there since the dark ages, and everybody was wondering if you were ever gonna get out of those things down there. And this is very impressive, so I'm real proud of it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sometimes when we come to work, at least I do, when I come to work, I feel like I can't believe that we're in a nice, I mean, it's not like it's really nice. but
Well,
I
your
think it's-
ancestors would be proud.
Yeah, I think we were probably in those portables for 40 or 50 years. So,
Oh, yeah, I moved there in '79.
yeah,
The ASC's.
Thank
that
you.
old? I thought it was 90s. I thought it was mid-90s.
79. Yeah.
79, wow.
We made good use of them, that's for sure.
Yes.
I believe we have one question online.
Ella?
Bella,
Yeah, I'm here.
go ahead.
So my question is it's more of a follow-up of what you guys were saying.
Go ahead.
So I think it's right where, what was it? Oh yeah, you guys were talking about the extra money for a new school because you guys are usually under budget. I'm sorry, there's a bit of background noise.
Did
So you
have
guys
a-
were talking about, what?
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is the first time I've ever done this. So when you guys say that you are under budget, and recently you guys have actually gotten more money than usual, where is that being transferred? So is that being transferred to the Sifton Elementary, Burton, or what schools?
So in the capital projects fund is what we were talking about, having, when the community passed a bond for $695 million, there was state match money. That full project came in under estimated expected costs. And so at that point in time, we had a board conversation and had a resolution passed that authorized some additional expenditures of those funds. So it was in the capital projects fund. We came in under expected project costs, and the money remained in that fund. And then there was a conversation about other projects that we would spend those dollars on, and Mill Plain was one of those projects that we talked about. So the money in the bond stays with the bond. It can only be used on the projects that were authorized or that the board has authorized. It can't be transferred between funds to be used in any way other than what it had been authorized for. I hope that answers your question.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Have another question online? On, are you there? On? On, if you're there, can you unmute yourself? It's so much easier to
Can
do
you hear me
that
now?
when we're online. All right, we can hear you now. Thank you.
So 2 questions. One, how much of the funding goes from the Evergreen School District to the ESD 112? Obviously, you may not be able to answer that and have to get back to me on that question. But then also, is it a conflict of interest for Mike Merlino and Tim Merlino both to sign the agreement between ESD 112 and ESD 114?
Any contract or agreements between ESD 112 and the ESD 114 actually are signed by the board, approved and assigned by the and signed by the board.
And if you want copies, we can get you copies of all the contracts.
Yes.
So
I don't know that we,
the interlocal agreement on non-renewing fiscal year that has both signatures from Tim and Mike.
I think we sign them and then the board authorizes them in the consent agenda.
Mhm.
And we've contracted with the ESD for, I don't know, many years for a number of different cooperatives that they run. And there's a number of different cooperatives that we participate in with the ESD. And honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know the number, but we can certainly get the number and share that.
It's more than a handful.
Well, no, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's probably, I'm guessing 10, 15 contracts. Does that sound about right, Lori?
I would say it's probably true of all of the districts in our region.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
some
we use the
Evergreen.
same services
Yeah.
provided.
And we likely have less than other districts
Yeah,
because,
because we have our own in-house.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it sounded like his question is like for the, I guess for the STEM interlocal, both your and Tim's signatures are on there. But it remains that the boards of Evergreen and the ASD both have to approve the contracts before they have any force.
Correct. As they always have. I think with the contracts between districts, it always is the board that has to authorize that through an intergovernmental. But as the superintendents, we both sign it.
Right.
And for those that aren't
Thank you.
really don't understand what ESD 112 is, we're 14, right?
Yeah, we're
114.
114. You're right.
It gets confusing. They're actually an educational service district. So they're a service provider to all of the local districts in our area. So they provide services to Evergreen and Vancouver and Battleground and Camas. And so it isn't something, just specifically it's not a provider or a contract provider for one service that is provided that that needs to go through certain steps. So the fact that Mike and his brother are both the superintendents, Mike is a superintendent here. And so it isn't a conflict of interest as far as the board is concerned, because we have total oversight of all contracts and all services that the ESD provides to Evergreen. Exactly. Well, and ESD, the local ESD oversees the local districts, but there are multiple ESDs or educational service districts that oversee, or, that are partnering with all of the school districts over the entire state.
There's 9 educational service districts and ESD 112, it's about 39 districts. Serves, it's basically coterminous with the 3rd Congressional District.
Goes up the gorge to Goldendale,
Mhm.
roughly, and then up the I-5 to Castle Rock, to the lake, and then to the beach.
Mammoth, right, Cap Mammoth?
Yeah, Wahkiakum and
Oh, yeah.
Ocean Beach and Acel and
Longview.
I actually used to work at the ESD.
Sorry, did you have another question? I thought you said you had 2. He's gone. Okay. So we have another John online that has questions. John, if you can unmute yourself for your question, please.
I asked both my questions, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more, Derek?
I think that's it.
That's it? All right. Any more questions from the audience here regarding the budget? All right, does the board have any questions?
I have a question or a comment. With the ESSER funds and kind of our uncertainty of enrollment, and just knowing that after spending a year of remote learning, I know that we've put some provisions in there for, extra teaching staff to ensure that our class sizes are going to stay relatively smaller, or
We particularly added some staff positions in certain grade levels to keep the numbers of kids in the classes a little lower, as well as keep the class sizes a little smaller. So we'll, depending on where enrollment comes in, those class sizes could even be smaller, and we'll have to determine kind of how we react to that once we get the actual numbers. Every year, we we wait to see the count date and then we react to that. We've set up, we this morning met and talked about the meetings with elementary folks, middle and high school folks. Those meetings will occur September 8th in the afternoon, and we'll kind of
adjust
determine
staff if
how
we
we
have
need
to,
correct.
especially for enrollment, it's higher at
Yeah, the
one
thing
location
is
over
again,
another.
we do have the ESSER funds to kind of help us through this year and next year, 21, 22, 22, 23, and even into 23, 24 if they lasted that long. So, you know, if class sizes are smaller, an option could be to keep class sizes smaller to, you know, as a way to react to the fact that kids haven't been in school for 19 months other than in a hybrid situation. So where you might have 21, 22, you maybe have 16, 17, you know, we may choose to just do that because it allows for more direct contact with kids.
And I had a chance to talk to a teacher from a district in Spokane area, and she was telling me that she had 30 kids in her elementary class last year. And so I'm thankful that in our budget and with the use of ESSER funds and things that we're gonna be able to keep classroom sizes small and then really work with individual students to make sure that they get the support that they need after being remote learning for a year.
And just to make sure everybody, we wouldn't have any elementary school classes with
No,
30
that's
in, regardless
our
of
normal,
ESSER
our
funds,
normal contract size don't allow for that.
unless Bill agrees to it.
Yeah.
Looks like he
So,
doesn't
yeah,
agree.
our normal contract doesn't allow for that, but I
Correct.
think with a little bit of flexibility in this year's budget with the ESSER funds, I'm thankful that we'll be able to maybe, you know,
Yeah.
do some of those things and identify where the need is.
Yep, exactly. Thank you.
So we're approving a budget that's about 8.5% higher than last year's. How much of that is attributed to claims on ESSER funds?
We have built into the budget, I think we built in about $21 million of ESSER funds. Doesn't mean we're going to use all of those funds, but we built that much in. Then we typically will build in some additional dollars as well, just in case there's contingency requirements for other grants that we might receive. So we're not going to,
So about half of it
I
is,
genuinely do not believe we're going to see we will not see an 8% increase. It's just built into the budget.
right. No, understanding that the budget is the plan for spending,
Correct.
not the actual spending.
Yep.
That's about, the difference between last year's budget is about half of it is anticipated to come from ESSER and the rest from the other funding sources, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I have one more question about our levy.
Yeah.
So it ends in 2022. What's the last month that we stop drawing the county funds from the levy that we're on now?
The levy that was passed in 2019 runs through December of 22. So
Okay.
You collect roughly 55% of it between January and August, and 45% in the fall, roughly. So it's 45% of that 38 million is what will be left. And so we know we'll have that for the 22-23 school year. Then the question is, what is the levy amount that we try to put on the ballot?
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the board? Entertain a motion to approve the 2021-2022 Evergreen School District 114 budget.
I move to approve the 2021-22 Evergreen School District 114 budget.
I second. All those in favor?
Aye.
I
Any opposed? Great. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And we are into the superintendent report. Back to you.
I'm going to open just by saying I would be remiss if I wouldn't thank all of the staff in our system that participated in the building of the budget. I should have done it already. In particular, Jennifer Jacobson, who kind of coordinates all of the work and bringing that together. And then Cindy Madsen in our HR department that does a tremendous amount of work in trying to bring all of the personnel file together for us to build the budget. So I appreciate all the work that went into that. Okay, I'm gonna talk about a few different things tonight, and we're gonna start with a week from today opening school and how excited everyone is. Our teachers are back this week in training and working in their buildings and preparing for our students to return next Tuesday. And again, a reminder that we are returning fully in 5 days a week, full-time next Tuesday. Very excited about that. We've talked about this several times. I did a sit-down interview today that I think goes out tomorrow that kind of talks about some of the guidance and the guidelines that have been handed down from the state. And one of the things I mentioned in terms of changes for this year, the physical distancing is a recommendation. It's not, we want to keep 3 feet as much as we possibly can, but that shouldn't get in the way of bringing students back. The attestations that were done in previous years, actually last year, is not a requirement any longer. And one of the things, we had hoped over the summer that the mask requirement would be relaxed. The state didn't do that. They continued with that, but they did allow for us to not have students wear masks at recess and when they're outdoors. Sports have already started in terms of practices, fall sports, with a different set of guidelines that aren't as restrictive as they were last year. Outdoor sports are considered lower risk because they're outdoors, so the mask requirement is not there. Indoors, there are mask requirements at certain times, but when you're practicing, it's not there. There are some testing requirements in certain sports. But just really excited to have our kids come back and be in school full time. And I know that our staff is real excited to have their students come back full time as well. So I think that's huge. I know you all will be out in different schools, dropping in, having an opportunity to see the kids get off the buses, get into their classes, probably even get into the buildings, kind of walk through a little bit. That'll be exciting. One of the things that we have had questions about, while we're really excited, the state, when they put their guidelines out, they basically said that their number one method of instruction was in person, in class, 5 days a week, full time. We've always had the option for alternative learning, ALE, to serve kids remotely. Last year, we had the hybrid option. And we've had some folks call out and ask specifically, why can't we just do what we did last year? Because they've got concerns about the case levels in the county. And so the response that we would give is the option of running hybrid the way it had been done is no longer an option for us. This, where we had the Wednesdays off and we had the number of hours a day. The state did very late in the school year last year provide for an alternative option that required 70% of the time either being on site or online at all times. So it was very late in the day or late in the year where that even became an option for us. And so as we looked through that, we talked with other districts because of the lack of timing, lack of ability to put planning in, and it was much different than what we had in place. We went forward, as other districts in the county did, with the option of ALE or you're in school. Now, we've talked as a teaching and learning group about working to try to create that option. What would that look like? The 70% option of either synchronous online or some combination of synchronous and in person. And so we will continue to look at that. I believe the state will likely leave that option intact as they went through the rulemaking process to make that. Last year and the year before, the state basically suspended all rules and just said, you can do this. And then later in the year, when we did go to hybrid, they had a requirement of how many hours were needed to be on site in order to be able to receive funding. So this is just a continual evolution of that. So that's the response to the question. There is an option, but we really didn't have the opportunity to implement that option as late as we received it. That's why we went with the ALE. So there is that option, as we've shared with the community throughout, that Legacy High School, if you're a student in grades 9 through 12, or Home Choice Academy, if you're in grades K through 8. And we have seen an uptick in those. I don't have the specific numbers, but I know that we've had to add some staff or add some contingencies for staff to support those programs. Another thing that changed from just our meeting 2 weeks ago was the governor's requirement for mandatory vaccinations for all staff. So he came out originally with the requirement for state employees, but schools were not considered state employees at that time. Subsequent to that, a week or so after that, or 2 weeks after that, Superintendent Reichdahl made the recommendation to Governor Inslee that school employees should be made part of that, his executive order. I think it's an executive order. And he took that under consideration, and I think over the weekend, and then the following Tuesday or Wednesday, he made that requirement mandatory as well, not just for schools, but also for colleges as well. And then he does allow for, they do allow for a religious exemption, and that religious exemption information, the forms that support that just were delivered to us late yesterday afternoon. So I know Janae and is working with our folks across the state in terms of how to interpret that. There's some pretty strict requirements for people that are trying to receive a religious exemption, and they can propose an accommodation, and then we have to work with them on what the accommodation might be in that instance. But kind of lays out dates. If you're going to have the Moderna vaccine, you need to initiate the first shot by this date. If it's the Pfizer vaccine, you need to initiate it by this date. If it's the Johnson & Johnson, which is the latest, it's October 4th. But if you're not fully vaccinated and have gone through the 2 weeks that you need to build up whatever immunity comes from the vaccination, by October 18th, that's the date where there would be an impact. So, you know, really what we're doing is working through that process and trying to make sure that our employees understand, and then provide the documents for folks that are interested in looking at a religious exemption. At the same time, we have to internally be kind of looking at and thinking about and planning for the fact that we may have issues with staffing if individuals don't move forward with that, and putting in contingencies on how to work with that, because there really isn't there is not a requirement for an employee to initiate the conversation and say, I'm not going to get vaccinated, and therefore you can plan for me not to be here. There really doesn't need to be anything until that October 18th. You either are vaccinated, provided the documentation, or you're not, and then we react to that. And individuals can work up to that point in time. So it's going to be interesting. I think that there's certainly, there's just certainly a lot of opinion around it, and we, if nothing else, over the last 19 months have learned that you really can't plan on anything being the same for more than a week or two, and that we need to react, and we need to be able to react. So in this time, as we work through this process, we would ask for patience, I think, throughout the community if there are impacts on our staffing, and trying to work through that and bringing in new staff or working with our staff through the process. But that definitely is something that we're spending time working on, in addition to the fact that we're working to bring our students back and have as normal of a return to school as possible.
Mike, that is for public and private.
Yeah, public and
School
private schools.
institution,
That's
okay.
correct. Yeah. Yeah. I also really quickly want to read a statement around something that flared up in the community also. I'm going to just read the statement. We are very aware of a situation with the teacher in our district that posted a COVID-related opinion on her personal Facebook page while on summer break. This post was then shared as a screenshot numerous times with a variety of people and other social media sites. Human Resources and the teacher's administrator reached out immediately to make contact with the individual. Even though the individual was on summer break, the board policy and procedure 2314 was still in force that informs employees of acceptable social media guidelines, even when posting on their own personal account. The individual has expressed sincere remorse and regret for the post, and has a deep regard for the safety of all staff, students, and community members. since this is a personnel matter, we cannot provide any more details on the situation. But I wanted to make sure that there was at least some statement out there. We're certainly aware we've been contacted a lot, so we're aware of it. The last couple things I will share is last weekend, I don't know, it wasn't a couple weekends ago, I was happy for all of us to be able to participate in the board retreat. I think it was on the 12th and 13th, or 13th and 14th, or something like that of August, which was great. I really enjoyed the work that we did the 2 days, and I think we had a couple great days, and I appreciate all the work that happened those 2 days. And then the last thing I would mention is tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock, there's a community kickoff strategic plan meeting. Tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock, our district we have a strategic plan. We have new board governance structure, board governance policies. We have commitments, declarations, beliefs. And it was the view of the board and the administration that what we needed to do was kind of take those things, work with the community, work with our internal staff, and reshape the work so that everybody's crystal clear. I think everybody's crystal clear that we work to support kids, but making sure that the strategic plan reflects the community, reflects what we're trying to do to serve our students, reflects the results policies in the board governance structure, and then also ties those results policies that the board sets along with operational expectations throughout the district, and then what we actually see in terms of results within our system. Like what are we looking at? How do we measure success? And how does that tie back up to the results policy? So I'm personally very excited about the beginning of the process and the beginning of our ability to kind of create this cycle that works both from the board all the way down to the school level and what they're doing on a daily basis to serve our students, how it results and fits with the results policies that are overarching the work that we're doing. So I'm excited about that. That's tomorrow evening. And I know Julie and Victoria are our board reps to the committee, and just really excited. I think we've got a series of meetings in the fall that we'll work through, and then hopefully by the early winter, we'll be having that the end results to some of this work, or we'll be working through the process anyway. So anyway, that's what we're working on.
Thank you. All right. Now we are going to have a teaching and learning and equity update, and that's with Clarissa Hightower. Good to see you. Sorry, you're on the one spot of the podium where I couldn't see back there. Yeah, right. Got my seat on the highest level, and I still need a pillow.
All right, thank you to the board and to our valued community member for being here tonight. I am going to share an update, a collective teaching, learning, and equity update. So that means for myself and for teaching and learning. Since we last met, since I last presented to you, as well as since Julie last presented to you, our team has been focused on two things: connection and capacity. We have, as teaching and learning equity leadership, have been meeting with building administrators to connect or reconnect around their goals for both themselves as a leader and for their schools. We've also been connecting, our teachers are back on campus, so teachers have been connecting with one another. That's super exciting. And then our specialists in the teaching and learning department have been connecting with our specialists in the equity department to get to know one another and build a good working relationship for all the work ahead this year. We are trying to solidify and make sure that we model the fact that equity doesn't live in a silo. It is also included in our teaching and learning work that we do. And so we're modeling that by, even today, by me presenting to you, not as a separate equity work, but our teaching and learning and equity work. The second is capacity. So yes, our teachers are back on campus, but not just to connect, but also to build their capacity around certain things. Some of those things include our Fontes and Pinnell curriculum. So they're working more on building teachers' capacity around phonics and word study for our students. Teachers as well as our counselors are learning about our social emotional learning playbook that we have ready for teachers to use to make sure our students are social and emotionally well to receive this great instruction that we're building for them. In our middle schools, our English language arts teachers are receiving professional development on the units of study. And our math teachers are receiving professional development on our Desmos curriculum. In addition to those content area capacity building, coming up this Thursday on August 26th, our teachers will also receive professional development on the Ready for Rigor framework that I shared with you all on last time from Zaretta Hammond's book and her work. And this framework utilizes our students' wealth of knowledge and experiences that they bring with them into the classroom that our educators can then connect to and build upon to ensure academic and social emotional success. Our teaching and learning and equity specialists, and that includes our special education specialists, our English language development specialists, and our content specialists, have all been working together to build what this professional development will look like for teachers. And so again, we are modeling the fact that we are all a team in the development of our teachers in service of students. And then also, as Mike already shared, all of us, including myself, are very much so looking forward to our students being on campus with us on next week. So we geared up for that. We're excited for it, and our teachers will be ready and well prepared for our students to come back for instruction.
Our high school staff always comes, a lot of high school staff comes to graduation, but it's really a celebration from the students' elementary teachers because everybody had a part in that. And the better we work together and communicate those student needs, the more successful our student is in our system. So I appreciate the work we're doing.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Clarissa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so next up is our good news report from Gail.
Again. And yay. Okay, this will be a coordination as I read, scroll, and watch what I'm doing. I am doing a really quick overview, and so for folks watching and they want to go back and look at the pictures of all of the stories that we're sharing, as well as the video links, it is on our website and it is part of board docs as well. So here we go. Here's some of our highlights from over the summer. So we have always recently been partnering with PAL, Police Activities League of Southwest Washington. So we've been holding some joint summer camps. Here you will see several of the camps that were held at Orchards Elementary. Peppa, the therapy horse, came and the students were able to put their painted hands on her and leave her hand printed. And Peppa's owner says that actually Peppa gets more out of it than the kids do. And so we, delightful pictures there. Another of the camps was a STEAM camp, and that focuses on science, technology, engineering, art, and math. As you know, we had and thousands of students that signed up for Camp Evergreen this summer. There was a session in June and a session in August. So we provided some of the highlights. Here's Sifton from our June camp. And here is Burton from our June camp as well. And then most recently here in August, we hosted an additional week for some of our middle school students as part of the Gear Up program. And the Gear Up program was really starting early with our students to encourage them to think about what college career success might look like. And so here they were doing some science CSI projects. Then we have a recent Mountain View graduate, Evie Carreno, who took her interest in water quality and produced a video and was an award winner in the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Filmmaker Award program. And then starting tomorrow night, you can tune into the NBC Olympics station and you will be able to see the Paralympics happening in Tokyo. You should watch for Ian Hung, who is a Burton Elementary, Cascade Middle School, and Evergreen High School alum. She started competing in wheelchair track as an athlete at Evergreen High School, went on to compete at the University of Illinois, and now she is representing us as a Paralympian in Tokyo. So you may know that we have combined 3 of our programs into one, and that's our family resource centers, our foster programs, and our McKinney-Bento program. It's now been renamed the Heart program. We gave a task to some of our high school students to come up with a new logo, and they worked with Erin Wintersong, our graphic designer. And so when you start seeing this popping up around schools and here in the district, that really is our new program that any student or family in need can look for the Heart program and be served in a variety of manners. But that's the combination logo that the students developed and Erin helped refine.
Gail, will that be like with our family community resource centers?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And then it's not only our students that were in summer school, but a number of our teachers. Columbia Valley was the host for a music course for educators that came from all over North and South America, learning new techniques on how to provide music instruction in more engaging manners for our students. You can see from the photos that there was a lot of dance and movement involved as well. And that is your good news from the last month or 2.
That's great. Thank you, Gail. That's, I love the new heart logo.
It is, it's lovely. And again, tune in, watch the Paralympics.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hey, another budget update?
This will just be quick. That's just not the 21-22. So we present every meeting about the current year's budget. And I would just say that we're down to 7 days left in the current year. And so what I typically say is my projections get a lot better the closer we get to this moment in time. So when we get together in September, I'll have a pretty good estimate of where we're going to end up. I'm just joking.
And don't forget, we're keeping that 4-year projection from the slide.
Yeah,
from
no, we
last
put away
meeting.
4-year projections. We every year they go away. No, this year, we started the year around 28 million. We'll end the year around 28 million or thereabouts. Again, it was an extremely challenging year from the perspective of enrollment decline, the perspective of our transportation revenue completely going away, our increased unemployment costs, just any number of issues to the tune of probably over $20 million negatively impacted. Without the ESSER funds, we would have really struggled. And it was really January before we knew that we were going to receive the ESSER funds to the level that we received them. So we're very thankful that we were able to continue programs for kids with those funds. But overall, it ends up being about a break-even year, very difficult, challenging year, but financially about a break-even year. So we're really just kind of gearing up for 21, 22 at this point.
Thank you. Board comments? Any board members have? Everybody speak at once.
I'm excited to start the work of the strategic plan process tomorrow night. I've been looking forward to working on that committee for a while. It's kind of been something that we've been talking about for, well, really probably since Mike started as superintendent, but really even before that, and having clear mission, vision, what our district wants to look like. We've done a lot of the work already, but it hasn't all been tied together. And so it's really an exciting chance for us to do that work.
Do you have anything? No.
Rob.
We attended a WASA AWSP Lunch and Learn about equity discussions in the community, which kind of ended up ratifying the stances that we took at the last board meeting about involving the community and what the words mean. Since that meeting, that the response to our conversations there and after we closed the ceremonial portion of the meeting and got to talk to some people, were received very positively. And I think if we're proceeding forward with the kind of community involvement that we're talking about with the strategic plan, and if we're as open and transparent as possible about the policies and I guess flexibilities and limitations that we have, as you talked about today, but it's going to be all right eventually. I guess I want to publicly say that I'm still very frustrated that we're all in masks, but I recognize the authority of the governor to issue emergency orders, and hope it comes to an end soon. We can get back to closer, more human interactions. Oh, I wanted to mention that next month, I think it's going to fall on the 7th, I've been asked to remote guest lecture to a small class of honors students about the intersection of technology and education. The students are students at Friends University in Wichita, Kansas, which is a pretty big distance, but I was hoping to use a couple of the videos that Gail's group had created, like the QR code scavenger hunt, and maybe one other. But if there are really good ones that I should be including for about 6 minutes worth of video in that presentation, I would be grateful to be pointed in the right direction. That you should be sharing with others, and we do. Oh. That's about it. There isn't anything legislative.
You say one more thing, Jenny?
Yeah.
I'm just super excited for the first day of school next week. As Mike mentioned, we're all going to be out in school buildings on the first day. And I am also really excited about getting to some of the kids' activities at the school, some fall football, some, volleyball, concerts, plays. It's going to be great to see kids performing and engaged in what they love to do at the schools. And so I'm super excited to kick off the school year.
We get the ribbon cuttings on Thursday.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right.
Yep.
Forgot that.
We have ribbon cuttings actually for Legacy and Transition in Hollingsworth. Have we renamed the transition program yet? I
Not
know
yet,
we
but
were
they're-
talking about
They're
it.
going to do that. They'll go through a process. And then
And then Marion
in Ellsworth.
and
right.
Ellsworth later
And
in the
then,
evening.
Ms. Hollingsworth is actually going to be here. Did you know that?
I
I
saw
did not
that.
know
Mrs.
that.
Hollingsworth. She's
Oh, that's
coming.
wonderful.
I think there's 4 of the family members. Is that right, Gail, including her?
Oh,
And I think she's 100 years old. Is that right?
she is.
Yeah. That's
So
great.
that's a tremendous honor to have her here Thursday.
Wow,
It
very
is, yeah.
cool. Yeah, to make the journey down, that
Yep.
is, wow, that's incredible.
Very cool.
Yeah. So for me, I am extremely excited to start school and send all 3 of my children back. It's I won't even say it's been fun, because it hasn't been. I'm ready. The schools are calling their names. I've been, school shopping and all of that, so we're ready. Also wanted to mention that the Evergreen School District Foundation's Gala is coming up on October 2nd. So that is the largest fundraiser for the foundation, for the Evergreen School District Foundation, and helping in providing for a lot of things they provide. I mean, I don't even want to try to list everything that they do for the district and for the families and students within our district. Also at the retreat that we had last week, 2 weeks ago, seems like it's all blending together. We were able to work a little more on our student representative policy and kind of how we're going to put those together. So I'm winding that down and getting that ready to put out into our high schools and hopefully start getting that program off the ground and that pilot going. So that's pretty exciting. And we're looking at 2 kids from each of our high schools to represent their high schools. Eventually, we're going to start a little smaller, but it's going to be a big group. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of the exciting things that we will be able to do with our student reps. Well, I have. Anything else? No? Okay. Future agenda items? Any suggestions?
I don't have anything tonight.
No?
We've already got agended the discussion about
CLT.
CRT and equity.
Mhm.
It's for a meeting in September, right?
Is it on our meeting? And so is that scheduled for September?
Or October, September?
Second meeting, she said.
Okay.
Second meeting in September. So the second meeting in September, we are slated to have a discussion on CRT and equity at that board meeting. Do we have the date of that? The second.
So the 7th, the 14th, the 28th, I think, probably.
28th, Tuesday, the
Is
28th?
that right?
Yes.
All right.
And yeah, I just want to make sure that we were scheduled for that.
Yes. That was brought up at the last meeting and now we have it scheduled. So thank you, Lori, for that. Okay, if there's nothing else from the board, we will open it up for citizen comments. I have 3 people that have signed up for citizen comments. We'd just like to remind the audience that you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Comments cannot be personnel related or about an individual employee or student and are not legal in nature. Right, so the first on the list for comment is Sarah. I'm probably going to do the last name wrong this time. Is it Aki? Aki. All right, I got the first name right. You can just go ahead and say your name and spell that for the record.
Sure. First and last name spelled. Okay, Sarah Akey, Sarahakey. So first, I would be amiss to not recognize what happened at the last board meeting. I want to thank Julie and Rob for a deliberate effort made to speak to some of the parents that hung behind during the recess. None of this is comfortable for anybody, and it was extremely appreciated. And it was refreshing to have the dialogue open. So thank you to you both for doing that. Tonight, I'm here to address the mask issue again. This continues to just be crazy. It is absolutely it's insane to mask our least vulnerable population and social distance them. Although, Mr. Merlino, thank you very much for addressing that. That guidance has since changed. If parents want to send their kids to school masked, then that should be an option. Mr. Merlino presented other available options such as hybrid earlier in this meeting. I'm sure that solutions could be found to make this more of a choice and not mandatory. I could stand here and list the reasons that this is ineffective, but instead, tonight I want to address the threat of the cut of funding from Olympia. You guys have to know that the governor nor Superintendent Reichdahl have any authority to withhold funding for noncompliance. It's another power grab. Instead, this district and districts around the state need to be concerned with the losing funding from the massive unenrollment rates that you are about to see if you're not seeing them already. If you, the people that we elected to be our voices, are not willing to act on our behalf, then we will speak volumes on our own. I'm going to leave you with this. You can fight back. The question is, will you work with us to do that? Will you have the courage to stand against this tyranny, to give families choices for what works best for them? This is not a one-size-fits-all, nor should it be. If you guys don't speak, the parents will, and our voices will be heard, with or without you. Stand with us, and we will be your biggest cheerleaders. But standing against us, there are parents in this district that will make sure that people who represent and will stand for values that free people deserve and are entitled to are the next to sit on this board. Thank you.
Perfect. Can you please say and spell your name for the record?
Ashley Osban, ASHLEYOSBAN.
I don't have a long speech. I'm not going to do a long speech. I just want to address something that happened yesterday. I went into my son's middle school to unenroll him because we've decided to go another route because of the mask issue. When I walked in, when I walked in, there was mask mandates all over the door. Not one teacher in that school was wearing a mask. Nobody. So why is it that teachers can work at school without a mask, but we can't send our kids to school without a mask? That's what I want to know. Why is it that when I walk in and there's a mask date and I'm supposed to be told to wear a mask, I'm supposed to wear a mask indoors, but when I walk in, there's 20 some teachers huddled in a little room, laughing, talking, not social distancing like we're supposed to, not wearing a mask like we're supposed to. And these are the people that are teaching our kids. Y'all want to mask our kids, lead by example, because that's not leading.
We now have Gary Wilson.
My name's Gary Wilson. I live here in the Evergreen School District, and my daughter attends the Evergreen School District. I've had 2 other daughters graduate. I want to bring up resolution 6365, and it states, now therefore, which all of you signed last year, now therefore be it resolved by the Evergreen School District number 114 that we condemn racism, racial violence, white supremacy, hate speech, and bigotry in all forms inside and outside of our schools. I appreciate the superintendent bringing up the reference earlier. Specifically, it was about the unvaccinated, saying let them die. And also, if we're lucky, we can cut out 30% of the population that votes the wrong way. That is hate speech. So this board needs to act on that. Thank you. Also, this is a quote from a Black father at another school board meeting. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is not combating racism. It's fanning the flames of what little embers are left. Just please think on that. Thank you. People across the country, all nationalities and races are standing up against this, saying this is racism. You're bringing it back. We're trying to get rid of it. Classifying people by their race. That's third. Check the Facts is a comprehensive sex ed curriculum used in 31 school districts in California and currently being reviewed by the Battleground School District. This curriculum would meet the mandate for teaching comprehensive sex ed in Washington State, but in a more widely supported style than the Planned Parenthood versions currently offered. Would you be willing to look at it? I can get you in touch with people, the author, and thank you. Lastly, remote online learning. Thank you, Superintendent, for bringing that up. That would be a win-win situation. I know the state apparently is pushing back on it, but this board, the superintendent, other school boards, other superintendents can push back on the state. You could sign a letter. What I'm meaning by it's a win-win, you'd have less exposure. My daughter was in it all last year. She excelled at it. You'd have less exposure of children to the vaccine to the virus. And this current virus, the Delta virus, is attacking children much more severely than the previous virus. So why not, if you had it last year for kids to keep kids out of school, why not at least offer it for those that want it? You'd have less exposure of children in the schools. I mean, common sense, plus any teachers that don't want to take the vaccine, they could be the ones teaching this. You wouldn't have to lose people. So just think on these, common sense. Thank you.
I'm assuming it's my turn to go, but I can't hear anybody else's audio.
John? Are you hearing me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So John, I have a couple questions. Obviously you can't answer them as the board. First question is, Mike did bring up the mention of religious exemptions for teachers to be able to opt out of the vaccine for that component. I didn't hear him mention medical exemptions. Is that also going to be included on that piece on there? And with that would then also be HIPAA requirements be required. Plus, can we then also get verification of everybody's vaccine status to verify that you've all been vaccinated also?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that we can follow back up with that information with your questions. Unfortunately, we're not able to answer or have
If you can leave
dialogue.
some contact information with Lori, then.
Lori, do you have contact information for John? Okay, John, if you wouldn't mind reaching out to us and we will get your questions answered for you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and put an email in there for the Q&A chat for Derek to look at.
Perfect, thank you. We have another one online. Just 1 second. Sorry, what was that? Russell?
Hey, good evening. This is Russell. I actually sent an email to most of you through the board and superintendent over the weekend. It was late Sunday night. And a gentleman already touched on this briefly. And I think my family has probably played the entire pandemic fairly safe and staying home and limited public interaction, just really not knowing, what the reality is. There's so much misinformation out there that it is frankly difficult to understand what is true and what is not true. And as we head into this academic year that starts in about a week, I find it interesting that we have spent more time addressing the excitement of getting back into the classroom and a teacher that made a social media post that perhaps was ill-advised than perhaps addressing the really large elephant in the room. And that's the fact that the Delta variant is here. It's very transmissible. And if we look to our brothers and sisters out on the East Coast and the South, it is spreading like wildfire in classrooms. And I do think that we need to have a serious conversation about addressing a remote learning option for those that are interested. And this echoes what the other gentleman talked about. My son, who will be a 5th grader, excelled in that platform, so much so that they were asking if we had tested for other programs. And we were frankly very pleased with that. The reality is children under 12 at this point do not have the ability to obtain a vaccination if that's what their families choose. And, children can be a vector of transmission of COVID if they happen to get it. And, there's a lot of people out there who could have health concerns that might prevent them from wanting their child to participate in classrooms where they're, I know that there's clearly people that are upset about wearing masks in the classroom. And there's probably people who are also kind of concerned that their kids are going to be sitting shoulder to shoulder, eating lunch without masks on. And so I'm asking for a strong consideration of an immediate offering of remote learning opportunity for those that are interested. And the offering that is in place, and I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but that is not the same platform that was offered last year. And I'm reading an article right now on K2.com where Gail is quoted as saying it's going to be a lot like we left school at the end of last school year in reference to what this school year is going to look like. And I have to ask if we're actually paying attention, because the world doesn't look anything like it did a year ago, and we are not offering the same programs that we did last year to keep our children safe and families safe. Thank you.
You, Russell. That it?
All right. So at this time, it's 6:46. We're going to go into recess to sign documents. We will return for a workshop session on the equity result policy and a legislative update, followed by an executive session to review the performance of a public employee, which is expected to last about an hour. We're adjourned.
Huh?
All right, we're gonna go ahead and bring the meeting back to order for our workshop. Well, I guess not back to order, but we're gonna go ahead and start our workshop now. The first item on our workshop is our equity results policy. I'll go ahead and turn this over to Director Rogers.
So we met and talked about our draft equity policy.
Hey, Rachel, can you put your microphone a little bit closer to you?
Is it on?
Is it on?
Shit to push it. Is it on?
There we go. Okay.
Hello?
Okay, so we had talked about our draft equity policy and turning that into a results policy. So I simply took language from the draft equity policy and changed that into something that in my mind resembled a results policy, saying that students will have this and will have that and will learn this and will, so I circulated it and totally open to rewording it, reconstituting it in its entirety, however the board wants this policy to be. This was just my crack at it.
Thank Rachel, first that you took this on for all of us.
Yes, thank you.
Much appreciated. But the first sentence, I really like that about how it states of any people or groups. How it reads, racism, discrimination, marginalization of any people or groups of people have no place in our community or in our schools. Because that's when we think about equity and what that means, it really speaks to all of our students. And so I think that was a really strong way to start this.
Yeah, I think that, we as a board have previously stated and continue to state that we will not stand for inequity, racism, discrimination, marginalization of any kind against any group of person for any reason. And I think that that's really the purpose of this results policy. So I think that's why I started there.
Mm-hmm.
Just gonna try to listen some more before, what I usually do.
Well, I was gonna say, I was just about to call on you, Rob, because I was gonna
Okay.
say, I know Rob.
What'd you say, wordsmithing? Is that?
No, doing what I usually do,
Oh.
which is talking a lot, right?
Well, and let's be clear before Rob starts talking, I did not have a results policy with me or in front of me. I think I just leaned over and Jenny whispered real quick, what a results policy is or something like that, so that I had an idea of what to model this after or I think she had a different results policy with us on during the retreat. So I didn't have this amazing book that Rob has. So
I was actually a little surprised, but not surprised, because Rachel was appointed to the board and then things began happening at a very rapid pace. And so it's an oversight on our part, I think, that we didn't catch you up on the whole governance model we're using before this
Well,
moment
just
where
in
you
that
took
book.
on a results policy.
I thought
But
it looked pretty good and pretty consistent with what our results are, but.
it is. I wanted to offer, because I went back and looked at the structure of things, right? Is that, and went back to Randy and Linda's book a little bit with their flow charts. And results policies are, according to this book, the fourth and final piece in the model, right? We have a lot of focus on operational expectations and interpretations and establishing, this protocol. But the fundamental work of the board, according to the book, is to recognize who the owners and the clients are, the owners being the patrons and voters and parents, and the clients being the students we serve. That's just the way they put it. The reason why we exist, and Mike puts it that way with, teach kids and keep them safe. It can be very simply stated. And our results policies, according to the model, need to take on that singular focus and avoid the temptation to use, I'm quoting here, such phrases as be exposed to or participate in or have the opportunity to. And so when I read through this, and the bullet points that Rachel picked out are absolutely what we want. But in the model, we might put things like students will learn in an environment where teachers, staff, and administrators are consciously working. That is more of an operational expectation sentence than it is a results sentence. And if you look at the other R policies, it's focused entirely on students. Students will experience physical, emotional, and social safety at school. Students will graduate with these characteristics, as we talked about in the retreat. So I left a link to a working directory with some of my thoughts about sentences that might belong in a results policy, pieces of it that might fit better in a governance culture policy, like that first paragraph. Would be a really good reform or a change to our statement of beliefs, is to include that language in our statement of beliefs and in our governance culture. And this is like, students will receive equitable access to public education resources, or students will receive supports and resources that remove barriers arising from race, ethnicity, language, poverty, and or ability. Students will experience a supportive and barrier-free learning environment. Those are just rephrases of these same ideas. The document I'm reading from is found on that link in board docs under executive content, the 2021 Coherent Governance Policies link, if you want to look at it. But I guess this means I'm suggesting one more condensing round. To the model even more firmly, and have the result be the student experience and the student outcomes. I'll just be repeating myself.
So I'm trying to get logged back in so I
Oh.
can see your link.
I wonder, do these connections work yet? Okay. Yeah. Working at the retreat. were they?
Fancy.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, Pete.
There you go.
Come here. I was reading from this language here. Am I thinking? Hello? I didn't do it. Nobody saw me do it.
Broke the whole system.
You didn't cast a spell, did you, Lauren? Oh, good.
Oh. It came on like.
That's. Oh, okay. Suggestions drawing from the draft would condense this language to what the student result is, and then language in the draft that has to do with statements of commitment, values, or culture, like that first paragraph, become part of our governance culture. Okay. And then.
When you say our governance culture, you mean a specific
I mean,
OA or?
Perhaps establishing a governance culture policy next to our other governance culture policies.
Okay.
That contain the language, or a modification of our statement of values, which already is in one of the governance culture policies.
So this would become 2 policies.
3.
3. Oh.
Or pieces, or be inserted into existing policies. Paragraphs, students will have accesses like B here, seemed to me to be like an operational expectation, in part because of the list, and also because we have evidence that we can produce participation rates, outcomes like graduation or 3rd grade reading and so forth, that could tell us whether or not the district operations are in compliance with something. That certainly came forward for me in number C here, letter C. Students will learn in an environment where teachers, staff, and administrators are doing something. That's the action-oriented, participation-oriented kind of language that they recommended we avoid in a results policy and include in an operational expectation. Because it's naming what teachers and administrators do rather than a result for students. So, work in connection with a results policy would be to choose tight statements of student results, symbols like our citizenship or R1 through R5. We have citizenship, safety, social emotional learning, academic achievement. And there might be something about equity to insert into each of those policies as well from these ideas. I have that document in my directory, but it's still on my home computer. So, put this on.
So basically, you're taking Rachel's words and then just formatting it into.
Yes.
And moving them around from this document into.
There's our mega result. Students will graduate, and here's how. Academic achievement. Students will think critically and creatively and be able to analyze and safety, which we worked on, deviates a little bit here from that formula, but result that from our climate and culture in schools, and wanted to be able to express that as a result for students. And that's where that fits. You can see how they're short and conclusive. around operational expectations and around strategic planning would be to say, how does the way we're doing this contribute to the results we seek? Comes into the interpretation cycle and then our approval of the indicators and the compliance review. Citizenship.
Or are you at this point just recommending another revision to fit within?
That's what I'd be recommending. Yeah, is Victoria able to chime in?
I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You and I were sort of the standard bearers of this at the beginning. I wondered what your thoughts were.
Well, I think that where we're at now is that we need to have it put, like you said, make the general results policy, the headline, and that information and what students will do, like you were talking about, but then take the bullet points that had to do with what staff will do, and put those in the appropriate operational expectations, I guess, is what I'm taking from it.
Yes.
Do you think you could take a stab at just because really all the words are great. I mean, what was written was really good. Could you now take it and shuffle things around where they need their appropriate locations?
Yes, I think so.
Because I think you're so well versed in that side of it. I don't think it needs to be rewritten. Maybe there's a couple tweaks if whatever, but the words are good, and what we want is there. They just need to be the sentences need to go into the right spots in the operational expectations and the results policy.
Is that the numbers then, what I'm getting? So on your example, is the one the results?
Yeah, that first one, I put R-X equity, just kind of categorizing things like that. And then GC-X equity.
And that would be our
our statements of values, our commitments to the results we seek. We might supply definitions in the governance culture, the way we were talking about community definitions of equity, race, ethnicity, ability, poverty, and establish that in an open process. I didn't number the policies basically because I only spent about 90 minutes on this today. Yeah, just kind of broke the paragraphs out into those different categories without a lot of really deep thought about exactly where they ought to go. The thing I could ask for, Rachel, is if you would mind collaborating back and forth with me on the idea. At least bring the results piece back in the very next meeting.
I don't understand what you would call the governance culture one.
Well, they would be the language like the preamble, the racism, discrimination, and marginalization have no place in our community or in our schools. Equity is a district focus. We must intentionally continually work to achieve it.
And we're just going to call it equity?
We could do that. We could call it a governance culture equity policy. expectations with one another would be to evaluate ourselves on whether or not we are governing with a focus on equity as we've defined it. I also think the GC area is a great place to produce a disaggregating list of exactly which groups we're talking about. Years go on when the groups change, or we might have to introduce some more, and also the definitions. Here, this is the language that came out of the citizen group, is that list of the groups, if you will. So we'd be free to use that language in governance culture.
Anything else on that then? Is that where we are at this point? From team?
Yes, sir.
Do you guys have anything you want to add to the equity work or the equity policy work?
Got buttons.
There we go. No, we were doing some sense making around the pieces that Rob was talking about, because they allude to how things will be measured. And so we're just talking about what you mean by condensed. So before you put your document up, you started one using the language that should be present in the results policy. Trying to stay away from activities and things like that. So now you have it, so we don't have to do that. But no, we were just doing that sense making and wondering if you want our input on anything that you're doing moving forward.
Could you say that again?
I said, wondering if you'd like our input on anything moving forward as you're going from the extended version that Rachel did for us, which was really good, to the more condensed results policy that you have here.
Always.
Okay,
Yes.
we're happy to.
What I think of is that we're taking the policy that the community wrote with your help, which is a district, which, like we talked about in our meeting, is take the place as a district policy, and we're kind of retconning all of the board policies to match that, so that we have this district policy that addresses mandates that are found in the results policies.
Yep.
So that's the lift and shift in order to align those things. And then the board can go about its work confident in the operations.
And is the idea still that the policy as it was, with the intent of taking things out that don't belong there, but that belong here, still would live in the 000?
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Yeah, okay.
The communities work that way.
Yes, please. We're not formal. We're in our workshop. Please come up. The only reason why we have you coming up is so we can actually hear you.
us.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I'm thinking about or reflecting on is around our families. And so you mentioned earlier that families are the owners as taxpayers, but they're also clients for us. And so when we think about results, our families should feel a sense of belonging.
Oh, yes.
Our families should experience materials that reflect their linguistic backgrounds. So that's the only additional just thought I was having, is just considering if it's just students in this results policy.
Because generally, well, the model has been to develop the results policies around students. The point you're making is very well taken, I think. I would welcome, we're going to have these suggestions, and if I include you in the little document share, be able to make some notes or make other suggestions about the words that create hope, where, so that it isn't a sterile thing, right? Bigger than a marginalized group has about a turn of phrase or a language element. We need to know that too.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to let Rob know when he's using big words.
Yeah, I could have put it that way.
Rob,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if some of that language having to do with people other than the students can go into either some of our linkage work, or just in general about communicating with the community and parents, and that we can lift some of that and use that language in a similar way, but identifying them in those policies.
Those would be that's the OE3 and OE9 consolidation work, the communication with the community policies.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was on my mind this afternoon too. It's a really good suggestion, and that is absolutely a place where we value your opinion. Yes, absolutely.
Right. Next item on the agenda is a legislative update.
We report to the Extended Federal Relations Network about the meeting with Jamie Herrera Butler, and they were really happy with the way that Kyle Sproul and I approached her and took the meeting and turned it into an establishment of relationship. I think I copied everybody on the email that I sent to her office, and the asks and things that WASDA had for her, which were the very specific committee-oriented things that she could actually do something about. And they're picking that up as a model for others to use with legislators over in the Congress from Washington State. That's all I really had to report to you about that piece of things. There hasn't been any legislative development, except for the fact that the General Assembly is no longer going to be in person.
What I would add is, I think I'd mentioned earlier that Melissa was interested in possibly coming to a meeting and talking about kind of from her perspective, things that we might be interested in. She shared a draft of some of those things, and then making sure that we're good with either one of the meetings in September or early October, that we could have Melissa come and participate. Either she Zooms in or she does it, or she comes down. Her areas that she mentioned were updating the prototypical school funding model to support health and safety staff, fully funding special education, which is what we've been pushing forever, fixed pupil transportation. We've talked about what we're trying to do in terms of the updating the formula, close opportunity gaps and advance equity, the work we're talking about. Support capital facilities, talking about updating SCAP formulas, and then regionalization, the fact that the regionalization formula doesn't really support Clark County with the 6% versus King County with the 18%. So those are the things that she raised, and then I think any other things that maybe come up from Rob and Julie, or anyone for that matter, through the work at WASDA, then we could incorporate that. So I'll try to get Melissa to come to one of our, we'll work in our conversation, Victoria, Jenny, and I, and get that set up so she can participate and just kind of talk through the issues and answer any questions or make any kind of expansion or changes to that.
I proposed a couple of meetings ago that we consider taking the prioritization list that comes from WASDA and seeing how many of those positions we feel comfortable outright adopting as the positions of this board, which I think would clarify her work and yours around advocacy. I think there's never been greater alignment between the interest groups around education than in the last 2 years. And we should continue to build on that. Yeah.
That's
Legislative?
all I got, yeah.
All right, that is the end of our workshop agenda as well. So we will go ahead and close this portion of the meeting, and we will go into an executive session to discuss and review the performance of a public employee. Thank you all. Have a good night.